Hello, and welcome to this segment of Google's Education on Air. My name is Seppi Hijazi Mogatam. We're going to spend the next half hour speaking with you about the landscape of computer science education in the US. We're going to be previewing some research with you that we've conducted on awareness and access and barriers to K-12 computer science education in the US. And we'll also be chatting with you a little bit about the policy landscape of computer science education. I'm joined today with Jennifer Wang, who is the CS Education Program Manager at Google, and Katie Hendrickson, who's the Advocacy and Policy Manager with Code.org. We're going to start things off with Jen. She's going to spend roughly 15 minutes giving you an overview of the research landscape. And following her, Katie will pick up and give you the landscape of policy related to computer science education. And we'll spend about 5 minutes to do Q&A with all of you. So please, I encourage you to take time to insert your questions, and we'll be sure to address them near the end of the session. Without further ado, I'm going to pull up the slides, and Jen, it's all yours.
Thanks, Seppi. So while Seppi's pulling up the slides, so Google under computer science is important for all students, but what we also recognize is that there's a lack of diversity in computer science. So what we wanted to do was to explore a bit more about why there was the lack of diversity in computer science, and we decided to do a comprehensive research study to understand what those factors looked like early on at the K-12 level. The second year of our multi-year study with Gallup, where we've surveyed respondents across the US to understand awareness, perceptions, opportunities, and limitations in computer science education at the K-12 level. We surveyed 16,000 respondents total in both years 1 and year 2 of the study. And in the second year of the study, we surveyed 1,600 students, 1,600 parents, 1,000 teachers, 9,800 principals, and 2,300 superintendents. And for the student and parent populations, we also targeted a minimum number of Black and Hispanic respondents so that we could do comparisons by race and ethnicity. And these respondents came from across the US, and all 5 populations are nationally representative and weighted in terms of demographics, so gender, race, ethnicity, geographic location, urbanicity, socioeconomic status, etc. So last year, in the first year of our study, we found really positive perceptions of computer science and computer science careers. And then this second year, we found that those really high positive perceptions persist. And we also found that there was really high value of computer science both last year and in the second year. In fact, we saw that 84% of parents said that computer science is at least as important as required classes like math, science, history, and English. And in fact, 24% of parents, about a quarter of parents, said that computer science was actually more important than these required classes. We also saw that 60% of educators, so teachers and administrators, agreed that computer science should be required when it's available. So across the board, there's just really high value of computer science. But the challenge is that access is not universal yet. Only 40% of K-12 principals reported having computer science classes with programming coding. And this is actually an increase from the first year of our study, which was from 2014 to 15, where we only saw 25% of principals say that they offered these computer science classes. So 40% is a huge increase, but it's not universal yet, and it's not even half of schools who are saying that they offer these kinds of learning opportunities. So within these learning opportunities, we also see that there are discrepancies in access and exposure. And in particular, what we're seeing is that Black and Hispanic students have less exposure to computers and role models. So in the left set of charts there, you can see the Hispanic students in the gray bars are less likely to say that they know an adult who works with computers or other types of technology. So Hispanic students are less likely to know a role model in their lives in the technology field. And then in the right two sets of bars there, and the yellow and gray bars, you can see that Black and Hispanic students are less likely than white students to use a computer at school and at home as frequently. And one thing, going back to that I want to ensure that you're thinking about too, is that to understand the types of experiences and preparation that students may not have had access to outside of school, and to not assume that students without experience aren't interested in these types of fields. So the next thing that we're seeing is, in terms of access to computer science classes at schools, we see that Black students are less likely to have access to these learning opportunities compared to white students. These are classes both that are dedicated to computer science and also computer science taught as part of other classes. And it does look like here that they're less likely to have access to these classes compared to Hispanic students. But when you control for income and parents' education, this difference between Black and Hispanic students actually is no longer significant. The next thing that I'll point out is that when we look at where students are learning computer science, of the students who have learned computer science, you can see in the right two sets of charts there, Black and Hispanic students are more likely to learn computer science in a group or club at school or in a formal group outside of school compared to white students. But when we look at where most students are learning computer science, 80% are learning it in a class at school. And that's the majority of students. And you can see that the next most common way of learning computer science is about 50 or 40% of students who are learning it on their own. When we look at gender, what we see is that girls are actually less aware of computer science learning opportunities outside of classes, outside of school classes. So in particular, they're less likely to know about opportunities that are groups or clubs at school. They're less likely to know about opportunities where students can learn computer science in their communities, and they're less likely to know about specific websites where they could learn computer science compared to boys. And girls are represented by the yellow bars there. And again, when we're looking at where students are learning computer science by gender, we see that boys across the board are more likely than girls to learn computer science outside of a dedicated class. So on their own, online, in a group or club at school, or in a formal group outside of school. But again, when we look at the most common way that students are learning computer science, regardless of gender, we see that both boys and girls are, about 80% of boys and girls are learning computer science in a class at school. So again, this is the most common way that students are learning computer science. And the next thing I'll look at are some discrepancies that we found in terms of encouragement. So we found that boys actually receive more encouragement than girls from teachers, parents, and the media. Next slide, please. So we found that boys were 1.5 times as likely as girls to say that they were told by a teacher that they would be good at computer science. We also found that boys were 1.7 times as likely to say that they were told by a parent that they would be good at computer science. And when we're looking at exposure in the media, we see that boys are about twice as likely as girls to often see someone like themselves who's engaged in computer science. So the next thing that we'll look at is with regards to interest in, with regards to interest and confidence. Sorry, there was an extra slide in there. So what we see that there are some signs, and so we want to look at what's happening when we are looking at students' interest and confidence. So for boys, not surprisingly, we see that they're more interested and more confident in learning computer science compared to girls. So in the left two sets of bars right there, you can see that boys in the red are much more likely to say that they're very confident or very interested in learning computer science compared to girls. They're more than twice as likely than girls to say this. And girls, in fact, in the gray bars you can see, are about twice as likely as boys to say that they're interested in learning computer science. And in the right two sets of bars there, you can see that boys are much more likely than girls to say that they're very confident they could learn computer science. And when we look by race and ethnicity, it's actually a little bit more complicated because we saw that there were a lot of structural barriers in terms of access and exposure to technology and computer science learning opportunities for these students. However, we found that Black and Hispanic students are actually more interested in learning computer science. 3 bars right there. We ask students how interested they are in learning computer science in the future, and you can see that both Black and Hispanic students are more likely than white students, who are in the very left, to say that they're very interested in learning computer science. And in the middle 3 bars there, we asked about confidence, and you can actually see that Black students in the very middle are much more likely to say that they're very confident that they could learn computer science. On the other hand, least likely to say that they're very confident that they could learn computer science. And when we look at parents, which are on the right 3 bars right there, we see that Black and Hispanic parents are much more likely compared to white parents to say that they think that their child will learn computer science. They think that it's very likely that their child will learn computer science. And in fact, over half of Hispanic parents say this, which is twice as many as the white parents. So finally, I'm going to talk through a little bit of the limitations and barriers to access. So again, we found that parents and educators really highly value computer science, and especially parents value computer science, and we saw Black and Hispanic parents value computer science. But what we're seeing is that less than 3 in 10 parents have explicitly expressed support for computer science to school officials. This is a huge contrast to the 9 in 10 parents that we saw that wanted their child to learn computer science. So this is one of the barriers that we're seeing, as even though they want it, they may not be expressing explicit support for it or asking for it. And when we looked at educators, what we found were the biggest barriers to offering computer science were test preparation for other subject areas and lack of teachers trained in computer science. And I'm sure to many of you, this is not a huge surprise to see this. But we did find some opportunities related to these barriers. We found that 7 in 10 principals agreed that it's a good idea to incorporate computer science into other subjects. And 3 in 5 teachers are willing to spend their own time to learn more about computer science. So our recommendations are to introduce computer science learning opportunities by incorporating computer science into these other subjects, which principals agree is a good idea. And in particular, with the challenge of needing to devote time and resources to subjects for test preparation, finding ways to incorporate computer science into those subjects. And take advantage of teachers' interest in learning more about computer science. Increase awareness and support of teacher training in computer science for teachers. So the last thing that I want to know is also to ensure that the students that you encourage into your classes are diverse. So making sure that you're thoughtful with the types of images that you portray about computer science, and be thoughtful about who you support towards computer science. Understand the disparate circumstances that students may be coming from. Again, we saw that Black and Hispanic students may not have as much of that outside access and exposure compared to other students. So making sure that you encourage the students. And we saw the huge gaps in encouragement among boys and girls as well. So making sure that you're encouraging students regardless of what social perceptions are around who can and cannot do computer science. So lastly, I encourage you to go to our website to check out our 2 latest reports, one on the diversity gaps in computer science and another on the trends comparing years 1 and 2 of our study. They're both at our website, g.co/CS-EDU-research. And so now I'll hand it off to Katie to talk through some of the policy landscape and ways to incorporate computer science and support teachers.
Okay, thank you. And hi, everybody. I'm Katie Hendrickson, and I'm an advocacy and policy manager at code.org, which is, if you can click through, an education nonprofit dedicated to expanding access to computer science and increasing participation in particular by girls and underrepresented students of color. Here you can see the demographics of students who are enrolled in code.org courses. Click one more time. And you can visit code.org/promote if you're interested in state policy and advocacy. There is more information there on what's happening and what you can do. So computer science education policy is in a really exciting place right now. Over the past 2 years, over 20 states have implemented policies to expand computer science. And that's really due to this groundswell of support from students, from parents, teachers, administrators, and all of these groups working together to get legislators and governors to implement these policies. So we have 9 policies in particular that we recommend that states consider. I'm not going to read through them all right now. I know they might be a little hard to see, but they are on our website. But I'm going to focus on 3 of them right now, as well as let you all know that there is an overarching idea of equity and diversity that we try to consider as well when encouraging states to consider implementing these policies. So the 3 policies I want to focus on are the 3 focuses of the Governors for Computer Science partnership. This is co-chaired bipartisan by a Republican and Democratic governor, Governor Hutchinson from Arkansas and Governor Inslee from Washington. Other governors on board right now are Rhode Island, Iowa, Virginia, and Idaho, and there are a couple more who are joining very soon. So these governors have committed to expanding computer science education in their states by working on these 3 main policies. First, to enable all high schools to offer at least 1 rigorous computer science course. Second, to fund professional learning opportunities for teachers. And third, to create high-quality academic K-12 standards in computer science. If you're interested in this governor's partnership or you want to see what's happening in those states, you can visit governorsforcs.org. Now I'm going to talk through a couple of key states and what is happening and what has happened in each of them. Idaho passed a comprehensive computer science education bill that established $2 million for computer science in the Governor's STEM Action Center. This also called for the creation of K-12 academic standards in computer science that are currently in progress. It created a computer science program manager position at the state level to coordinate these initiatives. They also encouraged partnership with industry and are working to create an online repository of resources for teachers. Washington passed a bill last year that was similarly comprehensive. They are working to establish K-12 computer science standards. They also work to develop a teacher certification in computer science, which is new for the state. And they also dedicated $2 million over 2 years for computer science education grants with a 1-to-1 industry match. Washington STEM has been working to award those grants, and they've been really focused on underserved populations in rural and urban areas across the state. Arkansas also has some comprehensive measures. This bill in particular created computer science standards. They've also implemented computer science in every high school in the state, which has a huge effect on the students who are able to take those courses. They've seen a 300% increase in females taking computer science and a 600% increase in African American females taking computer science. And this really shows how access is really critical to improving diversity in these courses. California has a lot of things going on. They recently passed a bill that created an advisory board to plan for the future of computer science in the state. They are working on developing computer science standards. They're also working on better aligning computer science courses with the University College A through G requirements. And a lot of stakeholders and partners are also working to expand computer science courses throughout the state with code.org, Exploring Computer Science, and other curriculum and professional development providers. So there are a bunch of other states that I could talk about, and I wish I could talk about them all. But again, if you want to know more about what's happening in your state or want to see what you can do, you can visit code.org/promote. In terms of federal policy, in 2016, early in the year, the White House announced the Computer Science for All initiative, which would provide funding for states and school districts around computer science, and also called for continued National Science Foundation funding for computer science programs and research. Although That funding is unlikely to happen. That did lead to the Computer Science Education Coalition, which is working to push Congress to fund a portion of that funding. That hasn't happened yet. Congress passed a continuing resolution to extend the budget into 2017, so there is still time. And if you're interested in this and you want to get in touch with your congressional representative who will be incoming in 2017, encourage them to fund the computer science education portion of the budget. Another initiative that recently launched is the K-12 Computer Science Framework. This came out in October. It is a framework that is describing what computer science for all students looks like at grade bands from kindergarten through 12th grade. It was steered by the Association for Computing Machinery, Code.org, the Computer Science Teachers Association, the Cyber Innovation Center, and the National Math and Science Initiative. All of these organizations work together with the community of computer science education, researchers, professionals, teachers, nonprofits, industry, to create these concepts and practices in computer science at the different grade bands. The idea is that the framework, when implemented, can empower students to be informed citizens of our world, to be able to create computer science artifacts on their own, to understand computing that's all around us in this modern world, and to be able to express themselves in other subjects using their new computing skills. So next slide, please. The framework has 5 core concepts and 7 core practices, which can be fit together to create meaningful experiences in computer science. The framework can be used to inform the development of standards. That's probably the main purpose of it, but it can also inform curriculum, K-12 pathways, teacher professional development. There are a lot of different uses for states, school districts, nonprofits, and other groups. The framework, in addition to the concepts and practices, next slide, can also provide a lot of guidance. So if you're interested in a vision for what computer science education could look like, or if you're interested in equity, or if you're more interested in implementation, or if you're a researcher, or if you're an early childhood educator and want to see how computer science can be fit into your classroom, there are chapters and guidance around all of those things. So the framework is available at k12cs.org if you'd like to read more or see what the concepts and practices are. Next slide. So like I said, the main purpose of the framework is intended to help states to develop their own K-12 computer science standards. Currently, only 6 states have K-12 computer science standards. Momentum is building. There are several others who have standards on the way, in progress. A lot of them are working with the framework and with the CSTA standards to create their new standards, but there's still a long way to go. And on the next slide, you'll see this is the progress that's been made in allowing computer science to count for graduation. In 2013, only 12 states allowed computer science to count as a graduation requirement, and currently 32 states and DC allow computer science to count towards high school graduation math or science requirements. So that's really due to the community and grassroots support trying to make sure that students have access to computer science and that it fits in their high school schedules. So just to summarize, these state policy changes are incredibly powerful when it comes to increasing diversity in computer science education. And I definitely encourage folks to get involved on the state level. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Quite a bit of information. Really exciting to learn all the great things about, from the research perspective, really about the access and barriers and having that knowledge to help inform a lot of the work that we do. And of course, the exciting momentum that we're seeing on the policy landscape is great news as well. I'm going to try to, in the next 5 minutes, switch over to some of the questions from our viewers. Just give me 1 second. So here's one question from Michelle Johnson. She asks, how can we encourage CS graduates to become teachers rather than go to a tech company where they can earn 2 or 3 times what teachers earn?
That's a really great question, and I'll take a first shot at answering it. I'm hearing that a lot. One of the main barriers for folks who want to become computer science teachers is that there just isn't a pathway for them. In some states, there is not a computer science teacher certification. In some states, there is a certification, but it's incredibly difficult to obtain, possibly impossible in some places due to the courses that are required. And it can just be difficult for those who want to teach computer science but don't have a pathway. The other thing that can help is encouraging universities to offer computer science education classes, both to computer science majors as well as to education majors, so that they can see what this subject looks like in K-12. It's definitely an issue. I see states are tackling it in different ways. They have stipends and programs to help people go back and earn their teaching certification if they don't have it already. But we'll see what the impact of that is in a couple of years.
Great, thank you. Jen, a question for you from Lyndon Dallas. Lyndon asks, how did you collect the gender encouragement data?
Yeah, so for the gender encouragement data, what we did was we just asked the students. One of the questions on the survey was, has a teacher ever told you that you would be good at computer science? And then another question, has a parent ever told you that you would be good at computer science? And the students answered yes, no, or don't know, or maybe. And so that's how we collected that information. And then we just looked at the responses by gender, whether the student was male or female.
Excellent. Jen, I have a question for you. In light of the barriers you shared that we learned from the research, what are some ways that you think educators can introduce computer science into their classrooms and schools?
Yeah, so one great way actually this coming week is CS Ed Week. So there are tons of resources out there already encouraging teachers to incorporate computer science into their classes through short activities like Hour of Code activities. And you can find those on the code.org website, as well as just the Hour of Code CS Ed Week website. And actually an upcoming session starting right after this session ends that our colleague Abby Bouchon Daniels is putting on is how to get involved and get ready for CS Ed Week. So she'll actually have some tips and resources on how to incorporate computer science just for this next week. And then Katie, maybe you can mention a little bit more about some of the longer term ways that educators can implement computer science.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the first big steps is offering computer science classes. People who are interested in teaching it in their own classrooms or starting to offer a class at the high school level is a good way to start increasing access. There are a lot of resources on code.org's website. We even have a list to other curriculum providers and other courses and professional development opportunities for teachers who are interested in teaching.
Excellent, thank you so much. So it's great that, Jen, you were able to plug CS Ed Week, because that is definitely a quick and easy way for educators to expose computer science to students. Are there any other nuggets that either we'd like to share around maybe as it relates to how educators themselves and community members and families can take this on themselves and be the advocates we need on the ground to help spread computer science education to more schools?
I'm glad that Jen mentioned Computer Science Education Week next week. Teachers and parents can host activities. It's really great to get kids coding with their parents at an after-school event. They can have events during the school day, have volunteers from the community come in and work with their students. And next week is a really great time to do that. I do want to wrap up by saying if anyone is interested in state policy or any of the things that I talked about, my email address is Katie, K-A-T-I-E, @code.org, and definitely feel free to email me.
Well, Jen, sorry to cut you off. I don't know if you had a response, but we are at time. And as moderator, I got to keep us to time. So thank you all for taking the time to check us out. This recording, this session will be available shortly. Thank you again, and have a great day.
And I'll also add that we'll continue to answer questions because I see there are many questions on the Q&A board.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.